Hello YouTube, and welcome back to my channel. After a long, cold winter, I finally had an opportunity to put together a summary video of my 2021 summer road trip. Some of my previous videos showed specific legs of this trip, but here I'm showing you the entire route and how my 2019 MT-07 did a fantastic job of traveling over 5,000 kilometers. This trip took me from Saskatoon across the Canadian prairies into Calgary, down Highway 22, also known as the Cowboy Trail, along Highway 3 up to Nelson and through the Kootenays, into Kelowna, down Highway 3 again, out to Vancouver and Victoria, and then ultimately up to Tofino. On the way back, I mostly retraced my steps, except when I left Kelowna, I went down Highway 33 to Highway 3 and out to Creston. So this video covers some of the highlights of the trip. So sit back, enjoy the ride, and who knows, maybe you'll get inspired to do a similar trip. The first leg was a 6.5-hour ride from Saskatoon to Calgary. So early in the morning, I got the bike all loaded up. I'll do another video to show my touring setup. I left early in the morning because it was a blistering hot day. Highs were in the high 30s Celsius. So I hit the road, ready for the adventure. Once I got out of the city, it was nothing but straight, clear roads, blue sky, plenty of horizon, and blistering heat. 6.5 hours of that. Day 2 started with an easy little jaunt from Calgary to Elbow Falls, and it was in Calgary where I met up with my nephew for this part of the trip. He was on his Harley Street Glide. Elbow Falls was a nice, peaceful introduction to some more interesting riding terrain. After Elbow Falls, we headed down the Cowboy Trail, Alberta Highway 22 south towards Crow's Nest Pass. Clear roads, rolling green hills, nice weather, slightly overcast, but not too warm. And I was beginning to think that this was great. My trip was going to have beautiful weather. Everything was going to be perfect. And then, hail. The weather decided to do its own thing. It wasn't too bad. It didn't bother me very much, but my nephew up ahead, he was wearing his vest and t-shirt with bare arms. So there were some pretty colorful words coming across the intercom system as he was getting pelted with this hail. But it didn't last too long. We slowed down a little bit, and eventually the weather cleared again. And the rest of the ride into Crow's Nest Pass was beautiful, sunny, and warm. After a couple of days in Crow's Nest Pass, we headed out again, this time along Highway 3. Now we were starting to get into the mountains. We went to Creston, and then from Creston we headed north, up Highway 3A, from Creston up to Crawford Bay. It was a beautiful ride along the eastern shore of Kootenay Lake, and very popular with lots of other riders. So we headed north, enjoying the twisty roads and the beautiful scenery. Eventually, we arrived at the ferry dock at Kootenay Bay that took us across to Balfour. After departing the ferry, we went to our destination for the next few days, which was the Blaylock Mansion, built in 1935 by Selwyn Blaylock. I've included a link below that describes some of the very interesting history of this place. So we spent the next day casually lounging around the pool with a very impromptu and decadent charcuterie table. It was wonderful. The next day was the best riding I've ever experienced. We went from Nelson up Highway 31 up to Kaslo, then across to New Denver, up to Nakusp, and down to the Needles Ferry, and then across Highway 6 to Vernon, and eventually down to Kelowna. These roads were spectacular. The views were amazing, the roads were clear, great twisties, and just an absolutely beautiful experience. If you plan to ride any mountain roads at any time in your life, you have to try the New Denver Pass from Kaslo to New Denver and Highway 6 from Needles to Vernon. After a few days in Kelowna, it was time to head out to the coast. And for the rest of the trip, I was riding solo. I left Kelowna, headed south on Highway 97, picked up Highway 3 and went west, through Princeton, Hope, and then I picked up the Trans-Canada Highway, and then I went to the Tsawwassen Ferry, where I eventually went to my destination in Victoria. A few days later was the westmost part of this trip, leaving Victoria, heading up Highway 1 to Nanaimo, and then across Highway 4 to Tofino. Along the way, we stopped at Cathedral Grove and enjoyed the immense beauty of the rainforest. After some more beautiful riding, all looked good. And then there was construction. There was some pretty major construction on Highway 4. It took a little while to get through it, but it was okay. And then finally, after all these travels from Saskatoon, there's the sign for Tofino. And we stayed there for a few days, where the temperature was actually quite a bit cooler. It was about 15 degrees instead of the 38 degrees that I had when I left Saskatoon. From Tofino and Victoria, I basically traced my route back to Kelowna. From Kelowna, I took a slightly different route. I went south on Highway 33 to Rock Creek, picked up Highway 3, and went into Creston. After Creston, I retraced my steps back to Calgary, ready for the final leg home. On the 24th day of the trip, I headed east again, across the prairies, back to Saskatoon, 5,300 kilometers. Although on this leg, something was missing. There were no more mountains, but it was still a beautiful ride across the prairies. So after all that travel, I finally made it home, and that's when I realized that a Yamaha MT-07 can be a great touring motorcycle if you're set up for it and if you have the right mentality. The best touring motorcycle is the one in your garage, and this is what's in my garage. I hope you enjoyed the video. There's links to some specific legs below. Take care and safe riding.